Happy Halloween! So today we are going to be talking about a pretty scary story. One of my favorite stories in the horror comic world.
Yeah, she's not very one for blood and guts.
No, it's not really my cup of tea.
I'll get you to read Hack and Slash one day.
No, you will not.
But this one is more of a thriller in the aspect that it gives you a delightful imagination of what's going to happen or what has happened, but it leaves it up to your own mind's eye.
Classic suspense.
Yes.
And a little bit of fright. A little bit of fright.
Just a little bit.
Just a little bit.
So today, Bag and Boarded is going into the first volume of Ted Naifeh's Courtney Crumrin, which is about a middle school girl who goes into the suburbs with her vapid parents to take care of their ailing, sickly, grey
Frail
uncle, Aloysius.
Uncle Aloysius.
A stern, beady-eyed man.
Creepy, one might say.
Very creepy. Now, Courtney Crumrin opens up with quite possibly one of my favorite narrators in comics, Butterworth. Butterworth is a goblin who has lived in the neighborhood for years. He can tell you all the backhanded deals, all the misgivings of families, and where he may have eaten one of their children.
Yeah, he has an interesting diet. Let's just
Yeah.
leave it at that.
But he likes hoodies, so that's okay. Courtney Crumb starts off with her family moving in to help Uncle Aloysius because he's frail and he needs help, although he doesn't look like it. But the main reason is because they want to be social climbers and they've maxed out their credit cards. And Uncle Aloysius is loaded. And it starts off with a very classic image. You see this really nice neighborhood, and Uncle Aloysius's mansion reminds you of something from the Addams Family. Not very welcoming. This house is that traditional creepy feeling. You don't feel like anything good happens in a house like this. I believe one of Courtney's opening thoughts are the basement's probably full of murdered children.
Yes. Yes.
But it quickly, the first volume of this series we're talking about is just 4 stories. It has hints of that classic grim fairy tale styling, but it is directed more towards a young adult mindset.
I would say so.
So
Yeah.
it's not overdone with blood and violence.
No, it's well written, a lot of suspense, and you know, it almost has a dark undertone, I would say.
Oh,
the
very
the
dark
sceneries
undertone.
are very dark. And Courtney, she's an outsider.
The best
You know?
protagonist.
Yeah. You think about most horror stories is you start with someone who's an outsider, who's unaccepted by the popular kids.
No. And the neighborhood she moves into is definitely one that was outside of her social class.
Yeah, it was upscale, you know, beautiful homes.
These are children of CEOs. You have to be somebody to live in this
NFL
neighborhood.
players.
I
Axel's dad
believe-
was ex-NFL player. Yeah.
So her family wanting to be social climbers have that tendency that we see, the classic trope of new money, but instead of like them actually being the good people, they really are that classic trope of new money that nobody wants to actually be around. But I know of my favorite story from this. I have to like going into Goblin Town. That would be the 3rd issue.
Yes.
What's your favorite one out of this?
My favorite one is when, I don't know the issue number, but it's the one where Courtney finds her uncle's books, special books, and casts it was like a love spell.
Oh, the
Where
Everybody Likes Me spell.
Everybody Likes Me
I think it's the
spell.
2nd issue, actually.
Okay, yeah. And like anything, when you do something like that, you don't think about the full extent of how far that can go, and it went a little too far.
Yeah.
And people were becoming a little violent
Oh, yes.
over her. So
I honestly think one of the things I love about this series is it takes itself seriously, but not that seriously. Like Courtney openly admits, is everybody in that issue, is everybody starting to hound her for her attention, she goes, I get it. everything has a price. I've learned my lesson. She openly did, like, instead of having to learn it through the misgiving, she automatically goes to, okay,
how do I stop this?
Be careful what you wish for. She openly says it.
And of course, her uncle comes to her rescue.
Yeah. And I love that he doesn't scold her in the sense of...
I think he's impressed with the curiosity.
I think he was impressed that she could pull it off.
She did it, yes.
Because as you go through the series, Aloysius opens up about why her parents are there. As he puts it, it's best to hide in plain sight. He's very old. He is her uncle, but the number of greats depends on who you talk to.
Yeah, I don't think the story ever goes into how old he actually is.
It does.
Or does it?
I don't think you ever got a chance.
I just haven't gotten to that issue yet.
There's actually an entire volume dedicated to Uncle Aloysius.
Okay.
But my favorite is that goes into Goblin Town. Her parents recruit her to be this babysitter
because of who the parents are. Because again, they're looking to
this social
get their leg in.
Because the last babysitter for this family drank something like 8 bottles of wine. I don't remember the name offhand. I think it was just a made up name anyways, and they're like $1,000 a bottle. Trash the house, and they're like, well, Courtney can do it. But come to find out, the baby's been kidnapped halfway through the night. The old style grim horrors of the Changeling, that where they switch babies out, the babies go to live like almost pets, but the Changeling gets to live in the family and grow up. I love it when he burps and she's like, I'm not paying for that alcohol. But then she goes in and her uncle kind of has to save her, but he likes the idea that this is tenacity. And this is just like this one weird suburb. I mean, she has to convince somebody to take her there because mortals aren't supposed to go there.
Right.
And you see this thriving, I want to say like an underground fairy town.
Right,
where,
it's a community.
Like,
yeah, it works just like...
And they're auctioning humans off, they're auctioning body parts.
Capitalist society.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's never detailed enough. Like, you see just that moment where you go, oh, that's going to be bad, and then you move off. Like, Courtney, in a sense, is still a teenage girl. She's slightly selfish. Like, she worries,
She's also a loner, too.
Yeah.
And she likes it. She doesn't feel sorry for herself, and she likes...
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she was worried about the baby because, well, it was under her care. But at the same time, she sees all these other people and she's just like, well, I can't help you at the moment. Moving on.
One problem at a time.
Yeah. As we've talked about, one of the things in this series that we really love is it is a horror comic in the sense that there is good and bad, this battle of evil. And we've talked a couple of our favorite issues, but I think what I really love about it is it has that cautionary tale aspect of it. It feels like each issue has this moment where if you are that kind of person that likes to put other people down, because Courtney is a loner, but she's not mean.
Right. She's not trying to start trouble. She's not trying to...
She'll lash back.
Right.
But I love how it tells you to... There's a part in the first issue where a character ends up in a predicament because he doesn't stick up for himself. You have bullies that are taken care of in certain ways. You have... They get their
comeuppance.
But in not unusual ways. Not so much that they get bullied by other people, but there
are just rewards.
Just rewards
that are handed out.
You have this response of being who you are. Just because it doesn't fit and it doesn't make people like you, doesn't mean that you need to change in that aspect. I love this. There's a moment where she yells at somebody and she's like, you just didn't do your homework. I don't like people, so you aren't being a good me.
Oh, and you're referring to her
to the doppelganger. Like, who came in and made her life perfect. Right. Everybody loved her. But she's like,
She was a fake version of Courtney.
Yeah, but
She was the Courtney that other people wanted to see, but she wasn't the true Courtney.
Got good grades.
Right.
That wanted to help her parents
Everyone
social
liked
climb.
her.
But and she's just like, I hate people. You sucked at your job. Leave. Or this idea of your favorite issue, like the attraction can work in opposite ways, or just the idea of when you make a bargain, you have to keep it. I
do.
I love those aspects in stories.
Accountability.
The accountability aspect.
Yeah.
It can truly come across as kind of black and white in that sense, but I do think that in times people do get what's coming to them. So you not to say that you're never not going to be mean.
I would say it's called karma.
Oh yeah, I mean, I love cautionary tales of karma. I love reading the old Brothers Grimm stories. Honestly, it's kind of why I like hack and slash, because there's that sense of karma. But with Courtney, like, it happens on an easier to digest level, but it's also a funner level. And then as the whole series progresses, there's technically 7 volumes to the series. The final volume has to deal with just Uncle Aloysius, but so the main series is volumes 1 through 6. So there's this overarching story arc that you don't really get into in the first one, but it plants the seeds that it just comes down to this. You get what's coming to you, especially when you're dealing with concepts of faith and belief. Like if you put yourself into positions like that and you believe that you have this kind of power for these characters, you also have to believe that other people can have that power
as well.
Like they have to. You definitely have to be balanced. Nobody's gonna be perfect. I mean, Courtney is far from perfect.
Right. Yes.
She has anger moments. She lashes out, and she has things that any of us would do. Like, oh, I have this power. I've discovered this. I want people to like me.
Right.
Or, well.
And she's still a teenager, so she's gonna make those teenager era of judgment.
Yeah, which is always kind of fun. That's why I think that horror films last as long as they do. You always have those
teenagers, right?
That she also comes to terms with the price. It kind of feels like a little bit like Cabin in the Woods in that sense. Like, I love the ending of Cabin in the Woods. I won't spoil it.
If you haven't seen it yet, check it out.
Definitely, it's definitely one of my favorite films to watch.
It's the right time of the year to watch it, so check it out.
But I love that kind of take of this untraditional ending.
Right. And there are rules.
Oh yeah, I love the aspect of rules. That you
have to have in a horror story, and I think this particular comic line follows those rules.
And I think that's where this series also is very strong, because it follows the rules of childhood. Whether they're for fear or they're for, how to treat people.
Right. Life lessons learned.
I mean, children definitely think different than adults. We lose something or we gain something. I think the argument could go either way. But we definitely do have a different mindset. And I love that this really captures and it helps me remember.
It really speaks to that.
What it kind of was to be as a kid.
Yeah.
And as sad as it is to say, children can be crueler than adults.
Can be. I think because when you're a child, you really play into those primitive feelings.
Yeah, that primitive, like that. I'm going to use the wrong psychological term here. What is it? The id?
Yeah. Well, he actually mentions that in the book. Yeah.
I couldn't remember if it was the id, the ego, or the superego. I think it's the id, though, right?
I think it's the id. Yeah.
I mean, because we have this belief. I remember having epic sword fights. That I still I wish I could do that. Like, I remember holding a baseball bat or like a really cool looking stick, and I could project that. But it does. I think maybe if I had somebody else who was projecting it with me, it would feel this as well. But that's the power that you get, and that belief system, and I believe this series really captures it.
It does. Can we talk about the Black Cat?
Black Cat. I love the reusage of tropes in this series.
I don't know if the cat has a name. If it does, I can't remember the cat's name.
I can't remember.
I just remember that the cat speaks, and just like most cats and, in animation or in comic lines, they always are the tellers of warning. They're not very compassionate about it. They're just very matter. They're very matter of fact, right? Would you say that?
I'm laughing because I remember she has it when she finds out the cat can talk, and she's like, "Why didn't you stop them from stealing the baby?" None of my business.
It's nothing to do with
She's
me.
like, "But it's your owner's babies. They have their lives and I have mine. We don't butt with each other." I just love that aspect. So one of the interesting aspects of this is the book that we have actually has an introduction by Ted Naifeh, and he talks about childhood fears.
What I liked about that part is when you think about when we were children, fear is really real when you are a child. You remember the monster under the bed, or the boogeyman, or the noises you would hear at night. Everything seemed bigger and louder as a kid. When you become an adult, those fears are still there, but I think they become faint as you get older. But when you're a child, like I can remember whenever I watched a scary movie or heard some scary story, like that was real to me. Like your mind's imagination just took hold of it, and you could almost feel the fear in your chest. You could just feel the fear in your room, like it was a thick fog and it was heavy. It was just very realistic, and the only thing that could fight it was the power of the blanket.
Yeah. I can remember I lived in a really old house. I think the house was over 110, 120 years old. There's nothing quite like living in a house that creepy.
Yeah, because you hear all the noises.
Oh,
you
yeah.
hear every single noise.
And that's what this house reminded me of in this series. Like, I automatically, I think one of the reasons I latched onto this is because, like, in the opening issue, Courtney, like, sees things out the corner of her eyes. For her, they're really there. There are little ghosts and ghouls and goblins in the first issue that live in the house, and they're kind of shadowing her and trying to figure out what kind of person she is. Like, it's almost like they're just as afraid of her as she is of them.
Right.
And I love the ending of that first issue, what she does with all of them. Like, I related to that because I lived in this house that had a rich history. It was one of the more wealthier houses to begin with.
It was big. It was a big house.
Yeah, it was a 2-story house. Actually, I think it was built in like 1870. It got used as a hospital for Indian wars.
So it had a story.
Yeah, there was like a dumbwaiter system in the house. It was one of the creepiest experiences. Big windows that just shook and rattled in the storms. It was amazing to live in, but creepy at the same time. Because there was a sense of like, when the lights were out and it was night, it was darker than dark. Like, it's almost like just everything
There's this absence of light.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't just like, oh, it's dark. It's like there's something just sucking in the light.
All the light.
And then I think my imagination started to play with me. And that's what I think this series is to me.
Yeah, I think this particular writing style really speaks to that childhood fear, and most importantly too is that childhood belief that impacts, that feeds into the fear. Like I think they have to almost go hand in hand with each other to really have a powerful combination.
It pulls you back. Because that era where anything is possible.
Yeah.
Whereas you can believe that you can be Superman, but you also believe you can be a slasher victim.
Right, or that you're going to be taken in the middle of the night.
Yeah. But I also think the series gives you a sense of hope that if you take that belief you have in that and you find the right stuff, you can fight back.
You can fight it. Like for me, it was my blanket.
Oh yeah.
I believe that my blanket could protect me from anything. You remember when you were scared and you put the blanket over your head, and for some reason that thin sheet of flannel could protect you from anything, and that's the power of a child's belief.
Which I never understood that, but have you ever caught yourself still feeling that way?
I do actually.
Like, so this Halloween, if you're going to enjoy a single book that enriches the imagination without being overly done. We recommend Looking for a Tale by Butterworth. Because he is just as much a part of the story as he is narrating, and he's nowhere near as nice as he wants you to believe.
And he breaks the fourth wall.
He does. I love characters that break the fourth wall. This quick little video for a recommendation for Halloween, I would recommend Lock and Key. I would recommend Hack and Slash or Eerie Comics collections from the 1950s. But if you want something that will kind of capture that childhood nostalgia, I would recommend Courtney Crumrin.
Right. It will definitely take you back to a time when fear was real.
For all of you, if you've read it, we'd love to hear if you've read it, or if this has intrigued you, we'd love to hear even more. Just leave your comment below. I'm Mike.
I'm Tabitha.
Like, dislike, ring the notification bell.
Subscribe and comment.
Subscribe and comment.
Subscribe and comment.
This has been Bag and Boarded. Happy Halloween.
See you next time.